Og einum þekktasta markaðsmanni heims þykir ýmislegt skort á bandaríska fyrirtækjamenningu og telur sterkustu vörumerki framtíðar byggist á því að fara almennilega með starfsfólkið, ekki slíta því út og hlunnfara ef hægt eins og enn sé allt of algengt. Við ræðum við Scott Bedbury sem byggði upp bæði Nike og Starbucks en velur núna helst verkefni sem mögulega bæta heiminn á einhvern hátt. En yfir í annað því Scott Bedbury fyrrum markaðsstjóri Starbucks og Nike kom til landsins á dögunum og messaði yfir íslensku markaðsfólki á aldarfjórðungsafmæli félagsskapar þess, Ímars og lúðursins íslensku auglýsingaverðlaunanna. Bedbury þykir galdra maður í uppbyggingu vörumerkja en velur verkefni sín af kostgæfni. Hann hafnaði því til að mynda að vinna að bættri ímynd kaþólsku kirkjunnar þrátt fyrir að vera kaþólskur sjálfur. Þóra Arnórsdóttir ræddi við hann á dögunum.
When you enter a company, it can be a small one. I mean, Starbucks wasn't a leading company when you entered there. Nike wasn't either. What does it take? What do you do? How do you take on the project?
Well, the first thing in any sort of project is to understand how the world views the brand. I mean, the executives all have a point of view about it, and it's usually sometimes insulated because they don't see everything on the outside. So I do what I call a big dig. And you just get out. When I got to Starbucks, I hired the head of insights, research guy from Nike, one of my best friends, came with me. And I said, go travel the world for 2 or 3 weeks. Have coffee in Japan, China, Austria, Italy, France, wherever you want to go. Go to Florida and have Cubano coffee.
What a great job.
That was a good job. He looked at me and said, really? I said, yeah, go. But I said, when you come back, tell me about coffee. Because the coffee companies don't know. The ones that sell it in the supermarket, they don't know. So he came back and he said, it's not about the coffee, it's the experience. It's what happens around the cup. And that became the launch, if you will, to redesign the stores as this third place between home and work for Starbucks, which had been around for 500 years. But that we were building an experience. And it's true of Nike or any other company. They're not just a sneaker company. Some people call Nike an energy company, that it's an empowerment brand, right? That's not by accident. You know, Nike doesn't talk a lot about large molecules of gas trapped in the thin, pliable membrane of an anatomically correct midsole. Hardly ever.
You say that the most important yet least understood assets for any company is its brand. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think it's easy to understand a product or a service or the company itself or who the CEO is. The brand is everything we think or feel about something. And that can be very intangible. It may not even be true, right? So the brand, when it works, when it's strong, it's very, very valuable. It's almost invaluable. Many
of the big brands, the brands of the big companies, are associated with child labor, unethical behavior in the third world, etc. You say that being big is no excuse for being bad. Do you think this is changing? Are they becoming more aware of this?
Oh, it's definitely changing. I think the internet, if it's done anything, has made everything very transparent. Because all it takes is one unhappy employee, somebody to have a bad experience, and it gets picked up and becomes a big news story.
You were especially famous for your work with Nike and Starbucks. Some people hate Starbucks exactly because it's so big, it's everywhere.
Except Iceland.
Except Iceland, that's true.
That'll change, I'll bet.
Are you sure?
It might.
But can brands become too big?
You know, they're only as big as they're welcome. You know, I remember the day when we opened our first Starbucks across the street from another Starbucks, and we had never really intended to do that, but one of them was worn out. It was in Vancouver. So while the one store was wearing out, we built a new one across the street, and as soon as that one opened up, we closed the old one. Within a day, the new one, which was twice as big, already had lines still going out the door. So we cleaned up and reopened the other one, and then both were at full capacity. So I guarantee you, Starbucks is only where it can make money, where there is enough business. It's not recklessly just trying to wipe out the face of the earth. And I think they've become much more conservative in the last few years about their growth.
Is there anything that you would just not work on, like tobacco or liquor or whatever?
I draw the line. I don't do tobacco. I do alcohol from time to time. I've worked with Russian Standard, a big vodka brand in Russia, and Corona, because I drink myself, so that'd be kind of two-faced not to do that. But I actually turned down the Roman Catholic Church once, so for that I'll probably serve some time in hell.
Why did you do that? Was it a matter of principle?
Yes, it was. I'm a Catholic, so if anybody should have helped them, it should have been me. But no, they had some abusive priests in the archdiocese around the United States, and they wanted some help with the image of the church. But it became clear to me they really didn't want to change the product. So I said, I can't help you. So for that, I'm sure I will serve time somewhere.
Do you have any favorite brands?
I have a huge amount of respect for Apple, and I think it's an easy one to go to, but I actually have a personal experience with it. It's very rare for Apple to come out with a bad product anymore. A lot of companies will just rush products to market just for the sake of sales, and they will hold on to something much longer than they wanted to before they release it to make sure it's right, which a lot of software companies don't do, as you know. They just simply put it out, we'll fix it later, right? Like Microsoft kind of comes to mind. So, no, I think I give lots of credit to companies that take very seriously what the consumer experience is going to be like, and then and take care of their employees. And that's the next big facet of branding is how does the organization treat its own people? Because that's becoming publicly available now too.
Exactly. But you say that's going to be the next big thing in branding. You can't have a great brand if you don't treat your people well.
Well, it's like a lot of companies are focused on service now, right? How do we improve our service? And my advice is if you don't treat your employees well, you can't expect your employees to treat customers well. So if I learned anything at Starbucks, which was a company built on taking care of the employee, I mean, Howard Schultz, the founder or the chairman, gave health care benefits to people that only work 20 hours a week. In the United States, the healthcare system is horrible. And stock in the company, no matter how many hours you worked. So by bending over backwards and treating the employee with respect, with dignity, they in turn gave service to the customer. So I think that's still a fresh dynamic for a lot of companies, is how you treat your employees impacts everything.
That view on life, is that maybe something that America might need a bit more into the industrial life?
Yes. I think that balance between work and because like a lot of people now have seen how hard they worked and then see so much of that sort of disappear, whether it was in their, their retirement, their investments, whatever it was, so sort of gone so quickly, right? And they worked so hard. So I think that balance, that sense of, I guess maybe a better way to describe this, I think more people, the enlightened people, not necessarily the Americans, are figuring out, are starting to think about what is it that matters most, right? And then, how can I be more present in the moments that matter most? To my wife, my kids, my friends at work, my peers.
Do those ideas get received in big companies?
Well, no, I think the bigger idea of treating your employees well, not overworking them, particularly if you get to a field where some level of creativity, and creativity should be everywhere, not just in marketing or product design, that if you work somebody, there's a correlation. You can't work somebody for 12 hours and get 12 times what you'd get in an hour. And there's been study after study about this, even in school and education. A kid can only be attentive for so long, and they need a break. So I think how we treat each other and how we treat the people that work for us is another field that's sort of opening up. So how do you allow people to work from home, right, who might have a sick child or a sick parent or something? But I think accepting people on their terms, the employee on whatever life they live, is the next big opportunity for employers that want to get the most out of their employees, because it may not mean more hours. They may be much more productive if you can somehow accommodate what their unique needs are. Actually, one of the projects I'm most proud of since leaving the corporate side, because I've been doing it for a number of years, is the original health care company in the United States. It's called Kaiser Permanente. And what's unique about it is, and healthcare is broken in the United States, they're unique because they're a not-for-profit. So in the United States, a for-profit doctor it's actually not in his or her best interest for you to stay healthy, because they don't make any money, right? So the incentive in the United States is in the wrong place. There's no real incentive to be healthy. You don't get a cheaper insurance policy if you're healthy. You just don't. So what Kaiser's done is move to a prevention model. So they're spending all of their, not all, but a lot of time and energy preventing unnecessary illness in children and adults, diabetes, obesity. And it's been astounding to watch what's happened. And they're now leading the rest of the healthcare industry in America by their example. So I think what my point is, and selfishly for me, as I look at client projects, and I try and find ones where I know I can help them make a difference, but I also want to help companies that somehow make the world a better place. And with healthcare in such bad shape in the United States, when they asked for my help, this was 2003, a long time ago, I said, I'm in.
And you think it's going to actually make a change?
Yeah, in fact, they're seeing reductions in, like, for example, in the Northern California area, if you're a Kaiser member and you have a heart attack, which a lot of men do, you're about 60% less likely to have a second heart attack if you're one of their patients. Because they know the moment you step on that track and you had the warning track, you have a heart attack, you might change your behavior for about 2 months, men, maybe 2 months, and then we go back to our bad habits.
Yeah.
But so Kaiser recognizes that they have that window to make behavior change in you. They'll teach you how to cook differently. They'll teach you about exercise. They'll give you a personal trainer, a nutritionist, whatever's necessary, because it's not in their best interest for you to come in for a double bypass surgery. Nobody wins in their model because it's unnecessary. In a for-profit deal, that's $250,000 to the hospital. But America can't do that any longer. We have to change.